Read my lips.
Welcome to Righting the Right with Larissa and Dan, the brother and sister that you'll want to argue with as much as your own.
You could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables.
But it's political bullshit.
So what do you think of Dan?
He's a jackass.
Because our country is going to hell.
So what do you think about Larissa?
She has been a real disaster for a lot of people, including the Democrats, who frankly can't stand her.
They're losers, they're babies.
There's an old saying in Tennessee, I know it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee, that says, fool me once, shame on you. If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
And now, here's Brother Dan and Sister Larissa. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of press, or the right of the people peacefully to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances.
And that, my friends, if you don't know, is the First Amendment.
Very good. Good job.
Welcome to the Righting the Right podcast. I'm Brother Dan here with
Sister Larissa.
And today's topic is going to be on
The First Amendment. Did you like that?
No.
No, don't ever do that again.
No, please do that every time. Because I want people to hear this podcast and to understand that I am the more intelligent sibling.
Hey!
And the more you do stuff like that...
You did a deaf man impression that no one got to hear because I'm nice enough to edit it out.
For what she's referring to is in our intro where I say the welcome to Righting the Right. I tried it in several different voices and one of them legitimately sounded like Duff Man was doing our intro. And if you're not familiar with Duff Man, I'm not going to do it because unlike Larissa, I'm not going to embarrass myself on the podcast.
Today, or at least right now, this minute.
So, again, First Amendment, it's a big topic right now, and it's really what this podcast is for and why we started it. It probably should have been our first podcast.
I felt like we kind of needed to lead into it, though. Get to know us a little bit better, understand our definitions before we got, because this is a pretty deep subject. I think it's a very important subject. I think ultimately the First Amendment is what makes America America, right?
It's what makes America great again. Without the First Amendment...
Without the word again. It's what makes America great.
It's
period.
what's always made America great.
Absolutely.
And our next podcast, I will tell you right now, next Friday, is going to be the Second Amendment.
Because one needs the other to survive.
We're not going to go into detail about the Second Amendment, but I will just say that before anybody gets their panties in a bunch, without the second, we might not still have our first. And without our first, the second is worthless.
Absolutely.
So, and the reason why we started this podcast is right now there is an assault on the First Amendment. And this is probably the time we're going to be most critical of the right, I think, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Because...
It's happening on both sides equally.
Absolutely. It's this idea of I will defend free speech that I agree with. It's there on both sides. The difference is right now, the left's narrative is mainstream, so we see a lot more silencing of the right. And the Republicans right now, I heard Brendan O'Neill from Spiked Online actually talked about this, and he said the left has allowed the right to hijack the free speech debate because no one on the left is talking about free speech. They've just abandoned the issue. They have now actually taken the side of free speech is not a good thing. Like I said on a previous podcast, I read on I cannot remember it was one of the British ones, and it said that free speech is a dog whistle for white supremacy. And again, that's just now the argument happening on the left, but I want to do this as a criticism hard on the right, because this came up because of the religious right. This
it's very true.
This debate we're having in our country about free speech started with the Orrin Hatch and Newt Gingrich 94 Republican movement. This anti-free speech, this controlling of morality and thought. It started there. So again, both sides are fully culpable. Right now, there's clearly one side that's more guilty. But hey, right, don't forget
You started it.
Exactly. You started it. Right now, the left is the little sister coming in and getting caught hitting her older brother in retaliation. And that applies to both of us because we both have an older brother and a little sister in our house. So
yes, yeah, we do.
And that's how it always starts.
Even though for us it's the opposite. I'm the big sister, he's the little brother.
Yeah, but I'm in our children.
Yeah, I know what you meant. I said,
Yes.
but we're the opposite. Our children are that, but I equally beat up my brother.
Yes. But the point is we just need to acknowledge what's going on. And you could talk, I mean, we could talk about anything. We could talk about Evergreen College here in Washington with Brett Weinstein.
Gosh, do we want to talk about that?
I really don't, not in too much detail. I would just encourage you, if you haven't, just go to YouTube and type in Evergreen College Brett Weinstein, and you'll see enough. I mean, we don't need to go into too much detail. It just went into anarchy on campus because
and pure lies. Just it's lies at this point. They're not even saying truth. It's so scary.
And it was all because I guess I'll give a little bit of backstory to it. Evergreen College has done something every year on their campus for the last 20 years. They call it Day of Absence. It's where people of color choose to not come to school for a day to show the impact that they have on campus. Brett Weinstein has always supported it. He had started to make arguments towards the end as society has progressed that it wasn't having the same impact it used to have, but he still supported the idea and the celebration of it. Well, this past year, they decided rather than to do that, they made an announcement that anybody who was white had to leave campus to show solidarity with everybody who on campus who was a person of color. Brett Weinstein immediately said, and he even joked about this, he said, being a Jewish man...
Doesn't that defeat the
Well,
purpose?
that was kind of his point. He said alarm bells start going off when people are telling you have to go based upon the way you look, based upon the way you were born. So, because he then spoke out and said, I have no problem with allowing people the option to not come, especially to try to show solidarity, but to then tell people that they are required to leave or be viewed as the enemy, which if you watch the videos, you will see that is what happened. Any white person that showed up on campus was hunted down and attacked as an enemy. Literal videos of people being assaulted, of the school being vandalized, of the school president being abducted and held against his will.
Yeah, they literally locked people in rooms and escorted them if they needed to use the restroom. And administration allowed it.
And apologized for it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now here we are, the leading person of the entire movement is now on the diversity board of the university. Not for the students, he is now actually helping to rewrite the diversity plan. And their big thing, and this is what I will talk about with the First Amendment, and what is the biggest threat on the First Amendment, is the word equity. We're no longer using the word equality, which is equal opportunity. It's now equity. Be wary anytime you hear that word, because that means equal outcome. And that's socialism, and that's communism, and that's the objective. And we're losing our free speech because we're not allowed to question these ideas anymore. It's happening on college campuses, but just, it's not fully out in society, but things that we're starting to see now leaking over.
But you'll see Congress support some of these things. You'll see people underlying messages.
These are state-funded schools.
Oh, I know.
I mean, there's a reason. If you just look at the numbers, they, starting in the mid-2000s, after the 2004 election, that election going forward, you can see the statistics. When college-educated people started overwhelmingly voting Democrat over Republican, and it's because of these movements on college campuses. They've been forcing the left narrative. And if you speak
well,
anything...
again, we've discussed this I think in our first or second podcast where I mentioned my instructor telling me which sources I was allowed to use and which ones I wasn't. And it only could meet his narrative. I mean, that was it. And to the point I dropped the class because I felt it was an unfair thing for him to do because he was forcing me to go by his beliefs, which had nothing to do with even the topic. He wasn't even a history teacher.
I didn't realize that. I thought he was.
No, he was an English teacher.
But yeah, I mean, that's where we are. We're losing our ability to say, I mean, we're now being told words are violence. Words are being redefined. Violence is now words. I heard a great thing, I don't want to say great thing, I'm using that word incorrectly, but Jordan Peterson went through some issues at University of Toronto. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail on that, over forced pronoun use in Canada, because this isn't a Canadian podcast. We're talking about the First Amendment in the United States.
Yeah, but that stuff trickles down.
Yes, but there was a TA who aired a video of him on a CBC broadcast who was being chastised. You've probably heard about this at Wilfrid Laurier. And her audio, because she recorded the conversation as she was being chastised, went viral and it became a thing and blah, blah, blah. So they had actually referenced that he was a member of the alt-right, which he's not. The alt-right is a white identitarian movement. It is a racist movement. It is no better than any of the movements on the left that do the same thing. And in fact, you could argue it's worse because there is more of a power structure behind it. And I've heard people say that. I've heard people on the right get upset when that gets said, but guess what? That's the reality of it. And I do believe the power structure behind it is deliberate to corrupt it. But aside from that, they excuse me, they were making the argument that he was a member of the alt-right and that he had promoted violence against transgendered people on campus. And I was just telling Larissa this.
Well, I watched the video. I watched the entire video.
And someone asked for the example of the violence, and they said, well, someone had a sign up that said it's okay to be straight. Which, again, like we talked about a moment ago, transgender has nothing to do with
your sexual orientation.
Your sexual orientation. Those are two separate things. So someone just had a sign up. It's like the meme that's going around everywhere. It's okay to be white. It's a counter to this insane movement. But that was their definition of violence, was a transgender person. And mind you, the person making this argument wasn't transgender. Because the person always trying to control your speech is always trying to control it on behalf of someone else.
Yes, yeah.
It's always done for that. It's always for someone else. It's never for their own offense. It's for someone else's offense. And that's what they do. They'll always try to silence you through the worst case scenario. Everything you will be silenced for, everything that we ever get silenced for in this country, ever in the history of the world, it's always, let's start attacking free speech by attacking soft targets. It's very easy to say, let's not let Nazis speak, because no one wants to hear a Nazi speak.
Absolutely.
But if we don't let the Nazi speak, then the Nazi could say, I don't want to let the communists speak. And then the communist can say, I don't want to let the capitalists speak. And then the capitalist can say, I don't want to let that person speak. And then it goes into a cycle of who gets to make that decision.
I mean, we go back, now this is from our first podcast, back to Larry Flynt, right? There's that subject.
Larissa's hero.
I know,
she
my
loves
hero.
to bring him up.
I do.
Good old Larry Flynt. I think she, deep down inside,
I'm not kidding. His story did change everything I thought. I am not someone, I can honestly say I'm not a porn watcher, never have been. I don't care for it. Nothing about it I like. But
I can say the opposite to all of those statements.
Yes, but everything that he represented and everything that he fought for, as horribly as he did it, he was correct. He was correct, and he fought for the right thing. And I think his movement was important. And I think we are there's some things we allowed that, and there was a lot of people trying to silence him on both sides.
Mostly on the right, though. Mostly that
the right. It
religious
was that
right.
religious right. It was the religious right trying to shut him down, and it was Jerry Falwell. He had to fight him. He had to go to court to fight to publish something that wasn't available to everyone. It wasn't for everyone to see. It was something you had to choose to buy. And he fought and won, and he won for a reason, because our First Amendment protects that.
And I talked about that on the previous podcast, that I don't think that he was doing it for noble reasons.
I don't
but
either.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We don't choose freedom.
And I actually think he's a horrible person. I don't like it. He was abusive to his wife. I do not actually like him. I think he's a horrible human being. I think everything that he represents is everything that I don't like. But that wasn't the point.
No, absolutely not. And I'm mentioning that because I made light of it last time.
Yeah.
Because it's just funny to hear my sister say that Larry Flynt is a personal hero. That she admires him and respects the person that he is.
That court case is an important court case to me. I wouldn't say that it's him in particular, but I would say the People versus Larry Flynt is a very, very important part of our history, and people need to recognize that.
And we can never lose it. And this is where the right needs to stand strong and prove that they are there for free speech, because I don't believe they are. And that's where we need to be wary of a sheep in wolf's clothing.
Absolutely.
Or wolf in sheep's clothing right now.
Yeah.
I had the free speech to say that wrong.
They're pretending like they're going after the left to protect their speech, I'm putting in quotes, but the reality is the more they can protect that, the more people can start siding with them, so they can eliminate the speech they don't like. I don't feel that our Congress ever looks at what our First Amendment actually represents. And it's not just speech, it's press, religion, peacefully assemble. Even, I hate protesting. I'll tell you right now, I think it's the most pointless, worthless thing that we do. What are you protesting, and who's listening? Because the people that you're protesting, no one's listening. The people that agree with you
are protesting with you.
So you're not changing anyone's mind. I think it's a complete waste of time. However,
in most cases, you're actually hurting your cause. When you're blocking traffic, you're pissing everybody off. When they get home from work and turn on the news and realize they were late getting home or late to work because you were blocking traffic, guess what? You just lost an ally.
However, I absolutely support every protester and every single time they do it. And I will never, I hate these people out there trying to stop them, telling them that they shouldn't be doing it, that they have no right to do it. They do. They absolutely do. It's in our First Amendment. And I will always, always fight for their right to do it, if I agree with it or not.
But it does say very clearly,
peaceably
assemble. Because I've heard people bring up the inauguration protests, which I'm putting that in quotes, because they were rioting. When they're burning cars.
Not just that, I actually had a phone call with a friend this weekend that her friend has attended every presidential inauguration since Clinton. She has gone to every inauguration since Clinton, and including Trump. She decided, I've never missed one, I'm not going to miss this one. And she goes to the inauguration. People were spitting on her. They were throwing things at her. She said, I was at Clinton's. I was at Obama's. But it shouldn't matter. Even if you were there to support Trump, it shouldn't matter. She was being spit on. And so, yes, that is not peaceful. But I do have to say,
I don't think blocking freeways is peaceful.
No,
it's against the law.
It is against the law. But but that's not where I'm going with that.
But I want to make sure that we don't come across as though we support these tactics.
No, absolutely not.
And that's what we need to be careful of, is these funded protests, which make no doubt about it. They are being funded from billionaires.
I see Craigslist ads searching for people to go out and they pay them to protest.
And they pay them to protest illegally, specifically because they want to give off the appearance that we are a police state when they crack down on criminals. Seattle, I'm amazed when I see the Seattle police. I will 100% give them credit. They are so good at being able to deal with violent protesters, and just those police are so well trained and they are so good
Well, now
at handling.
they've had their moments in the past, but
But if we look
now-
at the WTO riots, they handled that well.
Yeah. Yes, I agree, yes.
Everyone views that as a negative.
I'm not talking the WTO. There was the New Year's. Was it New Year's? It wasn't a protest at first. There was a shooting, and then it turned to protests. It was this. Eric was actually there. I can't even remember exactly what happened, but it was out of control, and the police.
But that was because it got out of control.
But it was years and years and years ago.
But my point is they
At least 15.
They are very well trained. Yeah, and then this was a long time ago, which the city's made improvements because again, we are in the greatest nation on earth, and I don't ever feel bad saying that. We are the freest nation on earth. You can maybe say not the greatest depending on what your definition is. If you want socialism, go somewhere that has socialism.
Yeah.
And you might believe that's the greatest nation. To me, I think we're the greatest because we're the freest. That's what matters most to me, is my freedom. And again, we cannot lose sight of what the First Amendment is all about. It's protecting speech you hate. I have no problem. I don't like hearing someone like Linda Sarsour stand up at the Women's March and say some of the hate-filled things she has said. I don't like that people say these things. I wish, as human beings, as caring people, we would choose
Not to do that, yeah.
I've always said you have every right to draw a cartoon of Muhammad, but you shouldn't, because that does matter. And you're alienating possible allies. You're angering people when you go out of your way to have those coloring cartoon contests for Muhammad down in Texas. I don't remember her name, the lady that organized that. She did that to incite violence. And I agree. The fact that it would incite violence proves her point. But that doesn't mean you should do it.
That you would want to. Yes. But in the end, we believe they are
she has
protected
a right
to do it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I don't have a problem. I don't like socialism at all.
No.
I want a completely free market economy. That is who I am. I'm a libertarian through and through. I want freedom. But I want people to want to donate money to charity.
Yeah.
To help people. I do that. I donate money to charities.
Yeah, so do
I donate money to causes.
Regularly.
I've given my own labor. I believe these are good things, but they need to be by choice. And just because you have the right to do something doesn't mean you need to do it. Now, am I saying you need to go march with the Nazis in Skokie? No.
Please
but
don't.
I'm saying if we just ignore them. I think it was Ben Shapiro. Somebody had said this the other day, and I was listening, and they said, someone had made the argument, like, what are we supposed to do? Just ignore the Nazis? And he said, yeah. So we've been ignoring them for 25 years.
Yep.
And they've had no impact on society. Now all of a sudden, they're victims. They're on the news, and they're the victim being attacked by you. You're giving them a platform. You're making people view Nazis as less reprehensible than you. The best thing to do is to let them speak. The more you sunlight is the best disinfectant. The more you let someone speak, the more they'll be exposed for their flawed beliefs.
We brought this up in our last podcast about how watching the BBC did more to fight the Nazi movement than we do here in America, because we're not letting them speak. We're babying them. But just let them bury themselves. They will. They will. They always do. Just like we say often with the liberals. They're eating their own.
Yes, and it's happening more and more, and we can't allow free speech to waver in any way. And we'll get into the other parts, because I do want to get into freedom of the press, and I do want to get into certain things.
And religion is important.
And freedom of religion. And freedom of speech is so vital to protect the speech that you disagree with. I'm not always the biggest Sam Harris fan for what he says, or his views, I mean, but I love what he says. And he always says, if you can't have a conversation with someone and summarize what you are understanding their belief to be without them disagreeing, then you're not having a good conversation. You should be able to summarize what you think they're telling you without them disagreeing with that. And once you have, then you're having a discussion. And until you do, you're arguing. And it was such a great statement. And then he went on to explain why he is validated in his views on radical Islam, where he was talking about, I can summarize these views and radical Islamists don't agree with me. Moderate Muslims do, and then argue with me on behalf of their views. And I'm summarizing someone else's views. He said so, and he uses it, and it's just such a great concept. And I've been challenging myself to do that more often now. So that's what I would say, is if you're not able to state someone else's opinion from their view, not the way you see it, then you're just, like you said, you're not having a discussion, you're just arguing.
It's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
It's a very hard thing to do. 'Cause it's hard not to, interject your own belief into something, anything.
And we need to do more of that.
I agree.
We need to, and the best way to overcome bad ideas, the best way to overcome Nazis marching is not to go hit them with bike locks. It's to ignore them, and anybody that's there,
Don't
try
give
to
them
discuss
power.
with them.
The more you talk about them, the more important they feel. And the more important they feel, the stronger they become, because now their confidence is raised, right? And the more confidence you give them, the stronger they become. So again, all of these things just keep making them stronger. Treat them like you would the bully, like your parent teaches you growing up. Ignore the bully. The bully will leave you alone if you ignore them. And if they don't, then the law is on our side, right? If they take it to the next step and they do things that they shouldn't do, there are consequences to poor actions.
And as long as they're not directly inciting violence, it's legal.
Yep.
As long as they're not being violent, it's legal. We can never lose focus of that. We can never lose focus of that fact. And the second we do, there's no point of a First Amendment anymore. Because all the other parts, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, those are all part of freedom of speech.
Absolutely.
And if we don't have true freedom of speech...
It's freedom of belief, right? I think ultimately.
It is, and we're getting into thought policing now. We can't lose focus. We'll talk about there's going to be a lot of free speech podcasts. There's going to be a lot of podcasts that we're going to talk about free speech issues. But the point of this, and we'll probably go more detail into Evergreen and into Jordan Peterson and into the Berkeley riots and everything else that goes on. But the purpose of our podcast, of what we're doing, is about free speech. And to me, anyone that supports freedom of speech is an ally, no matter what else they believe about anything else.
And just because you believe in allowing them to speak it doesn't mean you agree with it.
Exactly.
That is the number one thing people need to start realizing. Just because you allow someone to say something doesn't mean you agree with it. I just said I don't agree with anything that Larry Flynt did. I don't like him. I think he was an awful, awful, horrible man.
But he's her hero.
But he's my hero.
Because that's who she wants to be someday.
Yes.
An awful, awful, horrible man.
Yes.
Which today is now more than possible.
Yeah, very true.
But
Except for the awful part.
We just can't lose focus on that fact. And I'm going to say it over and over again. The second we give up that right, we're done.
We're not America anymore.
We're not. You can never, and the biggest issue we have right now with the First Amendment is self-censorship. Too many people are remaining silent because they're afraid to speak out.
Oh my!
We've allowed for the term that is being used all the time right now is the heckler's veto.
I cannot tell you how often I have friends private message me, email me, or text me to tell me, thank you for saying what you said today because I'm afraid to. I have it said to me all the time. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for speaking out. Thank you. I had a call yesterday. Someone actually said, I can't tell you how much I appreciate how brave you are. I'm now considered brave because I share my beliefs. It blows my mind. I'm now a brave person. Well, I don't consider myself brave for that, but they see the violence that's happening because people are afraid to speak out.
And they see people's lives being ruined. They'll dox you.
Yeah.
They'll rat you out to your employer.
Well, I didn't get jobs. I think I mentioned that in a previous podcast.
Because you worked for Gary
Johnson.
Didn't even work for Trump, but
Nope.
didn't help Hillary, so it's just as evil. It's just one of those things that I feel blessed to work where I work, that I have the freedom to do this, to say this, to do and speak freely without fear of consequence. I know that, and I enjoy that about my job. So I am very lucky. I have so many friends that do the same thing. I joke about it all the time, and I even posted it one time on Facebook, because my Facebook is personal and it's private. It's only me and my friends and family. Like, I don't have 8,000 friends
Like
on
me.
Facebook. I have 50. And these are people that I consider to be close friends and family. But they will never like my comments. They will private message me and say, "Oh my God, read this one."
Yeah.
And they'll send me another article
Oh my gosh,
like
I get that all the time.
And I get people that just send me things because they want me to share it.
Yeah. Oh
And-
my gosh, that happens to me every day.
And it's because people are afraid to speak out, and we can't lose that. We can't lose. We can't allow
I feel
fear
like
to control us.
We're going back to the 50s where it was, you can't say anything, like you can't listen to rock and roll music, right? You can't listen to rock and roll music because it's the devil's music. And there was all of these things like that happening. Why are we regressing? We should be progressing, right? And it's
Because the party that's supposed to be our progressive party is regressing.
Yeah.
And that is the reason why. I'm not saying the Republicans have no blame on this. They've always been the regressive party.
Yeah.
They've always been that.
But that's why we've needed the progressive party.
Exactly, to offset. What's always
offset.
made America great is having two sides and finding that happy middle. We had
Now we just have two extremes.
Yes, and they're both pulling us. I've always said, we've talked about this before. There's the left and right dynamic that everyone talks about, but there's really it's the quadrant. It's the social libertarian, the social authoritarian, the fiscal libertarian, and the fiscal authoritarian. And what we need to do is we need to unite on the social libertarian side. And I talked about this on a previous podcast. That Brett Weinstein talked about that, and he talks about that quite a bit, that we have a lot in common. And we're willing to agree on freedom of speech, on the Second Amendment, on freedom of the press, freedom of religion, on freedom. We just disagree on economic issues, but let us compromise on economic issues. There is zero compromise on our freedoms. And that's the thing where everyone's always like, "Oh, well, how about this?" No compromise at all. You can't tell me hate speech isn't free speech. That we've compromised free speech. You can't do that. Everything's okay or nothing's okay. And we have to be free speech absolutists. We cannot be afraid to speak up, and too many people are. And the worst part about it is they are because of the Twitter mob. I love the term, and I'm older than I want to admit I am, because I'm new to the term Twitch hunt, which I love. I thought it was amazing when I heard that term like 3 weeks ago for the first time. Have you heard that before?
Yes, I have.
People are afraid of the Twitch hunt. They really are.
Yeah.
They're afraid to be labeled. They're afraid to be outcast. And it's a real thing, and I understand it. And I'm not judging you if you feel that way, but don't be afraid to support people then that aren't. Don't be afraid to speak up when asked. You don't have to volunteer, but don't be afraid to speak up when asked. And just always, always, always stay focused on priorities and not parties.
You'll start to realize there's more people out there that agree with you.
I think most people do.
Yeah.
I think the overwhelming majority of the people in this country do.
But they're not the loud ones. That's
No.
what always happens. It's the loudest wins, right? That's what they've taught us. And that's not the case. That's not the case at all.
And we can't let it be. We have to stop letting the loudest voice. There's no, I joke about it all the time. I always say I'm radically moderate. But I'm not. But I'm really not. I'm a free speech absolutist. I am radical on that belief. I will stand up. I will die for that.
I'm a First Amendment radicalist. I would say that's what I am.
Yeah, and I'm a Second Amendment radicalist.
I wouldn't call myself a radicalist when it comes to the Second Amendment. I'm a very strong supporter, but I think that there's people out there like Jim.
Yeah, but when it comes to the First Amendment, we argue.
Yeah.
When it comes to the Second Amendment, we don't, and I'm with him on that.
Oh.
I've got into it. I have a friend that works for Homeland Security, and we've gotten into it. He was like, "So what? You think the average citizen should be able to build an atomic bomb because the government has it?" And I said, well, the good thing is the average American that's smart enough to build an atomic bomb is also going to be smart enough to not detonate the atomic bomb. We don't have to worry about that. Well, and then he talked about, well, what about someone owning a tank? And I said, well, guess what? Anyone that can afford a tank is buying it as an antique, not to go fire a tank.
And there's lots of collectors out there that actually own tanks. I went to the tank show this summer. I actually went to a huge tank show. It was actually pretty cool.
It's not a threat to society.
No,
but again, we won't go in. I'm going too deep into the Second Amendment now.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that. Let's go into the second part, because this is where I will say right now, there is an absolute attack on freedom of the press coming from the right.
Oh, yes.
Like I said earlier, the greatest disinfectant is sunlight. The media is burying itself right now for its corruption.
And they know it.
And so this idea, and again, this is where they're trying to incite. They're trying to incite, like I said, where they're paying protesters to illegally protest to create the illusion of freedoms being blocked. That's what the media is doing right now. They're deliberately lying. They're deliberately antagonizing the president.
What was the article that you just sent me where they admitted that they like sold themselves out? Or
Huffington Post shared an article that said even though 91% of Americans are going to get a tax cut from this new tax bill, 75% of them still think they aren't. And they were bragging about that. They were literally bragging that their propaganda against it has been so strong.
That wasn't even the article I'm talking about.
Oh.
That's hilarious. It was the one where they admitted that their lies were caught and that they were proving.
That was CNN. That was bragging, literally bragging, that the fact that they were caught lying
was a
proved
good thing.
how honest they were for admitting their lies after they were caught. I'm not joking. Like, that was literally the argument they were trying to make. They were patting themselves on the back. They were like, no, we got caught and we admitted it. Again, the tactic you need to look at with the media, like you do with anyone on freedom of speech, are they attacking ideas or are they attacking people? Because I always got really upset about the whole Russian hack thing. Everyone ignored the facts that came out that Bernie got an election stolen from him. And they started to attack the person, WikiLeaks. They attacked WikiLeaks. They attacked Russia.
To the point he had to go into hiding.
Well, he was already in hiding.
I know. But it was pretty extreme.
But that's and when someone's in the wrong, I mean, it's like that. I mean, look at it if you're in a relationship. Whenever you've lost on the facts, you make it personal. That's what happens. Whenever you're wrong, if you're arguing with your significant other and they start insulting you personally, you've won the conversation.
Yep.
You've won the argument.
That's how I always end any Twitter war. It ends with them insulting me and I say, okay, thank you, I won.
Exactly. Name calling. I'm outraged. Google Patrice O'Neill, Fox News. Worth the time. It's great. He gets into an argument with the feminists about free speech, about Opie and Anthony 20 years ago, or 10, 12 years ago, about free speech, because they had a homeless man on who joked about raping Condoleezza Rice. And he was a crazy homeless man who, I wouldn't even say he joked about raping her. He just joked about having sex with her. And it was just really weird, but it was a crazy old homeless man. And Opie and Anthony got in trouble for it. It's Howard Stern. It's, again, free speech. But again, now I'm trailing off. We're losing the freedom of the press conversation here.
But I find that What I do find ironic about all of it is the people trying to take away our freedoms more than anything are the press. I feel like I see a lot of that fight to stop, they're almost inciting the idea of taking away our First Amendment when they can't exist without it. Look at Howard Stern, right? He is so extreme left, and here he is, a guy who's had to fight to be able to do what he does.
But he's also very pro free speech.
Oh, I agree.
But
he still fights for the things that are anti-free speech.
Is he doing that now? I'm not familiar.
I mean, I guess it's been a long time since I've heard him say things, but I know what he's supporting out there.
I don't know enough about Howard Stern in that regard. I do believe there's an agenda. I do believe that. I believe the media is purposely trying to get people to want to shut them down, because if we attack the First Amendment, then we can control the First Amendment. And if you can get the people on your side by any means necessary, then great. That's why I'm saying we need to, this idea that, the media is corrupt, we need to shut them down. No, we don't. We need to let them continue to expose themselves. I've been arguing about a liberal media for 15 years. And people who used to tell me I was crazy are now telling me about the liberal media.
Yeah.
So I'm super into this stuff. I've always paid attention to it. It's why I talk about these things on college campus, because everyone says it's not happening now. Well, guess what? It's going to be happening in the general public within 10 years. That's how it happens. It starts on college campus and it winds up in society.
Well, because they're teaching it.
Exactly.
It's not even college campuses. It's happening in high schools.
Yeah. And it's not going to stop. So all we can do is give them enough rope to hang themselves. And that's what we should do. Let the media continue to lie. My God, Trump cannot take his foot out of his mouth for more than 5 minutes. And he's embarrassing himself, and he's hurting freedom. He's going after the media in a way the president shouldn't.
Absolutely.
I'm disgusted every time I see him attack CNN or attack MSNBC. And the worst part about it is I know people who go, yeah, he's saying what I think. And that's great, but the president shouldn't be saying that. And people are okay with that attack on the First Amendment because it's an attack on the First Amendment that they agree with. And if you think it's okay for the president to tell CNN that they're fake news, then it's just as good for Antifa to tell Ben Shapiro he can't speak. There's no difference between the two. And this is where I was talking about, we can't focus on party. We have to focus on policy, regardless of which side is doing it. It's not win or lose, right and left. It's win or lose, freedom or not. That's it. If you think the Republicans are wrong, you need to call them out. If you think the Democrats are wrong, you need to call them out. There can be no compromise on freedom.
Or stop electing Democrats and Republicans.
Well, good luck with that.
I know
that's a long time coming. I feel like we do have a president that's not either one. But we need to hold Trump accountable when he does this. We need to tell him to stop.
Yeah, and I watch people defend it even though they would attack it if it was the opposite.
I did attack it when Obama did stuff like that. There's times now where I'm just so glad we have a Republican in the White House because the media is finally holding him accountable. But they've just lost all credibility with everybody now that no one wants to hold him accountable. And we just have to get around that. It's just, we're at the point now where freedom of the press is under attack by the right and freedom of speech is under attack by the left. Freedom of religion is under attack by both sides. By
both, yeah, exactly.
And it's the religion that side disagrees with. And that's the part that we gotta stop doing.
Yep.
The left hates Christians, the right hates Muslims. Guess what? Nobody is defined by the group. And Muslims are individuals, Christians are individual.
Hate Jewish people. I'm noticing that. I see a lot of attack both sides to Jewish people.
I have to say there is more support for Jewish people in Israel from the religious right.
I agree with
because
that.
There is support for the nation of Israel. There is now, if we want to get into the alt-right and into the racism, there's a lot of anti-Semitism from the racial identity politics. But that's where we'll get into identity politics. and I'm sorry, collectivism by definition is on the left. I have made that argument that I don't understand this idea of how the National Socialist Party is right-wing. I don't understand how white identitarian movements are right-wing. I'll never understand that. Collectivism, identifying a group by an identity, by definition, is the left. It's the collective group. It is not the individual person. The whole point of being on the right is individual. It is sovereignty. It is anarchy. I mean, the irony of it is
extreme right is anarchy, extreme left is complete control.
And that's where I would argue the closest thing to the extreme right that we have is Antifa in the fact that they want anarchy, but they're completely extreme left in their fascist control of everything. It's really weird. They want anarchy, and they're willing to do it through control. It's so they're just such an enigma. But I would make the same argument about everybody, that nobody can just be defined by one thing. So this right-left dynamic, it kind of needs to go away because it's not even real anymore. I mean, it's no one's the definition. No one fits the definition anymore. Like I said, we're in a quadrant. We need to accept that we're social libertarians, identify other social libertarians, and just agree to disagree about economic policy.
Because those are things that we can try and manipulate and make them work to the way that will work for people easily, right? You're not changing a person to do that. You're changing an economy to do that.
Exactly. And we'll never be a socialist country. We don't have to worry about that. We won't.
Yeah, they won't allow that. Absolutely not. I agree.
It will never happen. There would be a revolution before that would happen.
And luckily, the people that don't want it have the guns.
Yeah, and that's what's great about this. I mean, I was looking at, everyone keeps talking about the tax cut for the rich, and we'll do a specific all on the tax cuts. I have no problem with giving people their money back. I mean, I don't want to be socialist. I want freedom. We're not even talking about freedom of religion right now like we were supposed to be.
Yeah.
But again, we don't need to go too detailed into this.
Yeah, because
both sides are wrong.
Yeah, both sides are wrong.
Dead wrong on this. The Muslim ban, I don't like the idea of a Muslim ban.
I don't either.
But I don't have the problem with saying we're going to give priority to religious minorities. I don't have a problem with that, as long as we're going to give that same freedom of religious minorities to other countries where religious minorities are being persecuted that aren't Christian. I say it all the time. I'm adamant against the Muslim ban. It's not a Muslim ban. I should be careful to use those words. I don't I don't like the language of it because it gave
that impression.
Yes, and it gave special treatment to religious minorities from those countries. And when you do that, then you make it a Muslim ban. Now, if we say every country's welcome, but we will specifically give special circumstance to oppressed groups, I don't have an issue with that. That should be everything that we would want. The refugees we want to bring in should be the oppressed groups. Again, we can speak from our family's history. A religious minority, we fled. Our family fled the Soviet Union to come to America
because
at the height of communism.
Yeah, the religious persecution.
And you know what? If America was keeping out communists or keeping out anyone from that country, my family wouldn't have been able to get here. And so we need to allow...
Which they came very close to doing in the 60s.
Yeah. And we can't allow that to happen. We have to allow for freedom of religion. Anybody should be welcome to come here under the right circumstances. I don't have a problem with vetting everybody thoroughly and doing everything the right way.
Yeah, but everybody.
But religion, regardless of the religion. And I will state, and I have said this openly, that I do believe Islam has some inherently bad beliefs. But I also believe Judaism has the same inherently bad beliefs. And I don't think Christianity has the same. I think Christianity has an interpretation problem.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Christianity specifically doesn't. And I'm not saying that as a Christian. I'm saying I'm a Christian because of the teachings of Christ.
But the problem is people don't, and they choose to pick out the pieces of the Bible that they like instead of, or the pieces of the Bible that fits their agenda instead of what actually the
What?
And that's where the problem with Christianity lies, is the people, not the religion.
Exactly. When Christians are picking Old Testament scripture to define something, I'm like, well, guess what? Jesus already fulfilled the Old Testament. The old law has been fulfilled. We have a new law. And that's what I always tell people. Judaism and Islam doesn't have a new law. They're still medieval religions. Jewish people in general, worldwide, ignore those rules, ignore those things about their religion. American Muslims do. And I've said that. That's where we are skewed as a country. American Muslims are moderate. They're secular. They ignore the religious dogma like American Jewish people do, like most American Christians do. The term, I think I talked about this in a previous podcast, I was raised Catholic. I love that term. It means I identify with the belief of Jesus Christ, but I don't believe any of the crap that they told me. I think that's a healthy thing. Sam Harris said it, we're a nation of heretics. That's what we are. We keep what we want, we get rid of what we don't want. And I get it, the religious zealots don't like that, but guess what? That's America. You have the freedom to do that. What we need are people like that. We want to bring in Muslim people. We want to bring in people from all over the world who are rejecting a hatred.
The hatred, exactly. That's the best way to put it, the hatred.
And
who are rejecting violence.
Exactly. And there's just been issues with their policies when the studies show that overwhelming the people getting in are young men. I've always believed that the most vulnerable should be allowed in first. The women and children, the minority groups, the Kurds. The Kurds are Muslim, but Kurds should absolutely be
and we need to make this clear too,
minority.
Which is something that's often ignored. The most vulnerable, he says women, right? In the Muslim religion, women are far more vulnerable. And that's often ignored.
Yeah. I mean, ignored by the left.
I know.
And that, again, is where we'll get into that later. But we can't ignore that piece of it. Freedom of religion. I've gotten into the argument with people. Nothing makes me more mad than when some flag-waving person starts talking about speaking English.
That drives me nuts.
This isn't part of the First Amendment, but God, we have no defined language in our country.
And I like that.
I do too.
That's what makes, we are a melting pot for a reason. We are people that just came together, and which is also why we have the biggest struggle, right? We're a bunch of tribes that have different points of view now trying to come together and force our points of view together. I watched a great video on it. It was actually an amazing video. And that's why there is so much conflict in America, because we're so different. And there's no other country in the world like us. And I love that. It should make us more open-minded is what it should do. But unfortunately,
biology doesn't allow that to happen.
Yeah.
It's biology.
Yeah.
And if we ignore the biological piece of it, we'll never solve it.
Yeah.
This idea that tribalism is unnatural is a myth. We need to admit that everyone has a natural prejudice to someone that doesn't look like them or doesn't act like them. That's natural.
And prejudice doesn't mean hate.
Yes. Prejudice means a prejudge, a difference. We notice it. We see it. What we have to be willing to admit is that we notice it and we see it. We choose to ignore it because we understand and respect the difference.
Yes, exactly.
That's what we need to do as a society.
Yeah.
And we've lost focus of that. Nothing makes me more mad than when someone says, I don't see race. Because you do. The people that say they don't see race are the people that are closetly hiding how much they see race. So when I do hear people saying I don't see race as a racist statement, it kind of indirectly is. But nothing bothers me more than this idea that somehow we should ignore that natural tendency in us. The only way we're going to evolve past it is if we recognize it and choose to work around it. And that's where we're evolving as a society.
Work through it.
Work through it, yes.
Yeah.
it's okay to see someone different than you and not understand who they are.
And
it's
people
not okay to hate them because of it.
Exactly. And I also think people need to be open to the fact that people don't understand it. And so asking those questions doesn't make you racist. It makes you curious. It makes you want to be more knowledgeable. To me, I think that's also important. I think a lot of things, one of the things in the test that we took in the last podcast was, has anyone ever touched your hair or asked about your hair? People are asking, should they touch? No. People are morons for touching because that's not your space. You don't touch someone's space. But if someone asks about your hair, it's because they don't understand it. They're curious. Educate them. Instead of just taking them as if they didn't care about you or they truly had hateful feelings towards you, they wouldn't ask. They wouldn't ask you those questions if they didn't care. They're asking because they're curious and they want to understand you. And I think that it's important that people recognize that. I have a friend, her daughter was born with half of her arm missing. And I love her for the fact that when her daughter was young and she would see someone staring, instead of getting angry as many parents do because you want to become naturally protective, right? It is a natural instinct to get angry.
Well, quick, I have to say, Jordan Peterson said, if you study the human mind, or no, it might have been Eric Weinstein. It was Eric Weinstein that said it. Said the same part of the mother's brain that makes her protect her child is the same part of the human brain that causes genocide.
Wow.
They've actually studied it. Genocidal thoughts come from the same part of the brain of a protective mother.
Well, because that's
what. But that's where the genocidal thoughts come from.
But she actually did
I know
the
it's
opposite.
a horrible correlation.
But she would see someone staring, and instead of getting angry or defensive, she would go up and say, "Hey, I noticed you looking. Did you have any questions? I would love to answer any questions you have." And it not only did it help.
She shut down her genocidal thoughts.
Yes, she did. It also helped with her daughter's confidence, right? It also helped her daughter not be embarrassed about it. It was like, yeah, this is just who I am. Deal with it, And I feel like that's what a lot of people aren't willing to do. And I think that's, again, not a political thing. I think it's a human nature thing. We become defensive. Me and my skin color. I'm extremely defensive about my skin color. It's something that bothers me because I was teased so much about it. And it took me a really long time where I got to the point that I can actually joke about it myself, make fun of myself. But it took me a very, very long time to get there because of the harassment that I received, as a child and a young adult. And now I just play along with it. I think it's funny. It doesn't have the same effect on me because I don't allow it to have that effect on me anymore.
I also think it's harder for women to cope with those kinds of things in general. Because as a boy growing up, I was teased about my nose all the time. I was taught to be tougher and just get in a fight.
Yeah, that's very true.
I could punch someone in the face if they said something about my nose, and the problem was gone.
Yeah. Which I don't think is a good solution either.
I think it's part of growing up and learning, though.
Yeah.
I do. I think every boy should be punched in the face at some point in their childhood so they understand what mouthing off to the wrong person does.
But I don't think
we live in a society
get punched in the face for mouthing off like you.
We live in a society of kids who have never been punched in the face, and they don't understand that you don't.
There are consequences to your actions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
anyway, my point
as a kid, I'm not saying violence is okay. Yeah. I'm saying it was easier for us to cope with that. We were allowed to deal with those things in a primal way that women can't.
My entire point is we need to not just accept each other's differences, but we also need to accept that we're different from everyone else. I'm not the same as my brother, and we came from the same parents.
And we're both pasty skinned white people.
But my brother looks very Jewish. He looks Jewish. People think he's Jewish all the time. He looks exactly like Adam Sandler.
I don't look exactly like Adam Sandler.
My kids think he looks like Adam Sandler. Every time Adam Sandler grows a beard, my brother has a beard. He dresses...
When Adam Sandler gains weight, I gain weight. When he loses weight, I lose weight.
It's kind of scary. I'm starting to think he stalks him. But anyway, the point is that's what my brother looks like. And I don't. Even though we both look like my mom. Kind of ironic.
Yeah. But aside from from that, it's to the tribalism piece. It's why identity politics are poison. We're trying to be broken up into groups, and be skeptical of everyone that wants to define you in that way and take away your individual identity and tell you that you should be with this. Anyone that says you should be dating someone that looks like you because of their skin color or because of their religion or because of anything like that. Yes, it's natural to feel that way. It's natural and it's okay. Don't let someone tell you you're racist because you feel that way. Don't let someone tell you you're racist because you don't feel that way. It's okay to date someone that looks different than you. It's okay to date someone that looks like you. We have to stop labeling everybody.
Yeah.
We should be skeptical of anyone who's doing that. Anyone who says you're this and it's a descriptor and not an ideal.
All of that leads to that taking away our freedom of speech, right?
And it's done deliberately.
Yeah, it is absolutely done deliberately. But we need to wrap up.
I think that's
today.
a good place to end it.
Yep.
So please subscribe if you haven't subscribed and you're still listening, or if this is the first time you've listened. We will be posting these every Friday at noon, like we said last time.
And if you're listening on our website, you can also find us on iTunes or Google Play,
Stitcher.
Stitcher. You don't have to listen on our website. We're happy to have you listen on our website, but you can find us in easier ways as well.
And subscribe and get the notification when we're posting. And every Friday by noon, like we said, you'll get this one. So,
and if you wanna tweet us some hate speech, you can find us at writing RIGHTing RIGHTING and you can tweet us some hate speech if you like.
And I'm Last
Meaning
True
you
Liberal.
Hate us so much.
Yeah, and I'm at Last True Liberal, and she's at Reese Cup. So thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing, and have a good one. We'll talk to you next Friday.
See you next Friday.
See you next Friday talking about guns.
Woo! Guns!